It's time to start checking some of those items off our Christmas list. And so I thought I would share with you my new design that I'm calling Christmas Candy. I think you probably can figure out why I've called it that. This design features several different colored candy canes that are going around the outside of the ornament, kind of acting as a frame. And then I have some other candy cane down here. I have your Christmas heart candy on this one. And I have some gumdrops on this one. What I also did that I want to share with you is on my background, I did a stencil. I'm going to tell you just quickly, first of all, I prepared my surface. This was wood, so I sanded it, and you always want to seal your wood because it's a porous surface and you don't want your paint just bleeding into it or soaking up into it. But here's a little trick that I like to do is I mix my sealer with my base coat color about 1 to 1, mix that together and put that on as my first base coat. That way you're sealing and doing your first base coat at the same time. When that's dry, then I put on my second base coat color, which in this case is Burlap by Deco Art. And you can see here that I did add a stencil to the background. It doesn't show up a whole lot on the painted ornament, but it does come through and adds a little bit of extra texture to the background, so it's not just a solid flat background. What I used for this, I actually used two, I'm going to move these out of the way. I used two different stencils for the backgrounds on here. The first one is called Swirling Snowflakes. I know I didn't clean it. I apologize. But this one is from Patricia Rollinson at Creative Arts Lifestyle. And the second one I used is called Holly and Vines. And this is a Lori Speltz stencil. And you can get this at Artist Club or from Lori herself. I did the snowflakes as the background on the hard Christmas candy. And I used the Holly and Vine as the background underneath the gumdrops. And then on the third one, under the candy cane, I did a little bit of both. So just kind of stencil it in. And all you need to do is just kind of fit it on your background however it looks good for you. And you can move it around. Whichever one that you like the best, that's what I like to do, is choose a couple different ones and put them on and even have them overlap. Again, just adds a little extra texture to your background. I'm just going to briefly show you how I do that. I've already put out my paints on my palette here. I have a little bit of antique white and a little bit of bleach sand, both by Deco Art here on my palette, and I've got them side by side. I'm using a Dynasty dry brush. This actually is a number 14. You could probably use something like a 10 or a 12. I like this better than a stencil brush because the bristles are a little bit softer, and that works a little better for me. Since the antique white is very close in color to the burlap, I needed to lighten it up a little bit, but I didn't want to just use the bleach sand because I didn't want it to be that light. I wanted just to be a subtle background stencil. So I'm just loading my dry brush, picking up both of those colors in the brush, taking the excess out on my palette. And then I'm just, wherever I wanted to lay my stencil, I just lay it down in here. Wherever I wanted to apply the stencil, I'm just tapping and adding that to the background. And then when I lift it up, I think, okay, I need to add a little bit more, so maybe I'm just going to put this stencil here. Just pick up a little more paint in my brush. And again, as I said, I'm kind of overlapping these a little bit, and it just gives you a nice little textured background underneath the candy. So I'm not going to finish that up. I just want to give you an idea. I think you can figure out how to do that on your own. The first thing I'd like to work on are the candy cane frames that go around each ornament. I'm going to do the red one. I will give you the colors that I used for the green candy cane and also the lime green and pink candy cane. But I'm not going to demo those for you because I think once I do one, you'll be able to figure out how to do the rest. So let's start with the red. And for this, you need to use a brush that's going to be pretty close inside to the stroke that you want to put on. I'm using a number 8 for this candy cane. I did give you a pattern, or there is a pattern for this, and the red stripes are marked with a cross hatching on it. However, I suggest you just use it as a guide. At least for me, it's just easier to go around the circle and pull these strokes rather than have to stay right inside that pattern line. So I'm just going to wet my brush, and I'm adding the red stripes with Tuscan Red. I always load from the side of the puddle, pressing the brush down so I don't have any blobs of paint on there. And that's a pretty, the 8 shader is a nice width to make the candy canes on here. Need to keep turning my surface as I go around. You need to think S stroke. So I've already got a few started here. Again, I don't have any pattern here. I'm just going to kind of gauge, and it doesn't have to be 100% even. I'm starting at the top with the tips of my bristles on the chisel edge, press down and pull through, end up on the chisel edge. And I'm just going to keep adding S strokes all the way around till I get to the opposite side. Once I have my first, on this layer, my first coat I should say, I'm starting from the outside and pulling in. Once those are dry, and these are dry over here, I'm going to pick up my paint the same way, but instead of pulling from the outside in, this time I'm starting from the inside, doing the exact same stroke and pulling out. What happens with this, usually the end of your S stroke is the better, looks better, so this will even out your strokes and it will give you better coverage if you pull it this way. And then you're just going to continue all the way around, filling in those strokes as you put in your second coat. Once those are in, I use my liner brush, and you probably know when you're using your liner, you need a little extra water in your paint and your brush, so I'm going to get that in kind of, I like to think of it as like 2% milk. People used to say get it inky, but nobody uses ink anymore, so what does that look like? And then it doesn't matter, on one side of each of these red stripes, I'm putting a thin green line. And for this, I'm using Deco Art Evergreen. So again, just all the way around in between the red strokes, I'm using the Evergreen. I did do a second coat on these, and I did the exact same thing I did on the red, where I started on the outside edge and pulled in, or the first coat, if you start on the inside and pull out, second coat, start on the outside and pull in. Whichever way you start, just go the opposite direction on the second coat, and you get much better coverage when you do that. Okay, so let's move over here. All my areas are dry. I'm going to switch over to a number 4 dry brush by Dynasty. And that's FM Black Gold. I'm going to use it dry again, and we're going to start adding some highlights to these stripes, the red stripes. So my first color is Deco Art Scarlet. I'm picking that up in my brush and taking the excess out on my palette. And I'm going to have my highlight on my candy cane more toward the outside edge, if you can see that right here. I'm not having it right in the center, but a little closer to the outside edge. So after I have my paint in my brush, I have a little bit in here, but I'm just dry brushing this. Again, probably, let's say the second or the first third of my area here. I'm going to pick up a little bit more paint. I'm running out of paint. And as my candy cane curves, I still want this to be my highlight side, so I'm going to add my highlight up here on this part of that hooked area of my candy cane. Then with my dirty brush, so I still have scarlet in my brush, I'm going to pick up just a tad more of that, and then I'm going to pick up a little bit of Orange Twist by Deco Art in my brush. I like to keep the dirty brush because then the color doesn't change so drastically and it doesn't shock you quite so much. So then I'm just going to come over here to my scarlet areas, and I'm just going to add a little bit more highlight right on top of that. I'm not covering the entire area that I did the scarlet because I want a little bit of that showing through. This is my brightest highlight here. I think you get the idea. So I'm going to do that all the way around, picking up paint as I need to. I'm going to clean my brush out. And then on my stripes, I added some highlight too. So I'm going to pick up some of that evergreen back in my liner brush. And I'm just going to pick up a little bit of Margarita in there, again by Deco Art. Just to kind of lighten it up a little bit. And I'm going to add a little highlight to each green stripe in the same area where I have the highlight of my red highlights. So then same thing here on this hooked area. It's going to be closer to the outside edge of my candy cane. Okay, so that's the red candy cane. I'm going to just tell you briefly the colors I used here. On my green, my big green stripes, again, I used my number 8 shader in evergreen. And once again, if I started from the outside and pulled in on the first coat, second coat, you're going to go from the outside toward, or the inside toward the outside. And then my red stripe is done with the Tuscan red. My highlight, again, dry brushed on just like I did on the red. First with lime green, or I'm sorry, Irish moss. It looks like lime green, doesn't it? So it's Deco Art, Irish moss. And then with the dirty brush, I picked up a little bit of Margarita and add a little bit more highlight in there. On my red stripes, I picked up some Wild Berry by Deco Art. And then if you need to get it a little bit brighter, you can add a little bit of bleached sand to your dirty brush, and that'll brighten it up a little bit. On this ornament, the stripes, the green stripes, are based in Irish moss. My highlight is first done with Margarita and the dry brush, and then a little bit of chartreuse yellow from Deco Art, one of my favorite colors, to brighten that up. The pink stripes are done with Wild Berry. My highlight, again, I picked up with the liner brush a little bit of blush pink. And then for a second highlight, I added a little bit of bleached sand to it in that same area as the green was highlighted. Okay, so that's that. Let's come over here, back here to our surface. And I'm going to show you how I did the shading, and this shading is exactly the same on all of the ornaments. So whether it's the red candy cane or the green, the dark green or the light green, all your shading is the same. I'm using a flat shader brush, wetting it and taking the excess water out and picking up a corner of the brush, side load and blend. And you may know, but if you don't, I blend in the same area, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That way I'm picking up paint and moisture instead of leaving it all over my palette. that color. What you might want to do, we're going to shade the entire candy cane. Oops, and I just realized I forgot to tell you what color to base coat that candy cane. It is base coated in Deco Art Antique White. And I did use my number 10 filbert brush because it fits right in there. After I have my brush loaded, it will fit right in there, and I can pull that all the way around to fill in that candy cane. Before I do my shading on the candy cane, I'm going to dampen the area with a little bit of water. You don't want it puddly or runny, but you just want it to be damp. That extra water is going to help to move that paint, so you don't have to keep reloading into your water and into your paint. Just going to pick up a tad more paint in my brush because I've been talking. Again, I'm blending out on the exact same path where I did before. This color is going to go all the way around the inside edge. All the way around. And when I get over here to where the hooked part rests over the other, I'm going to come right next to that hooked area and add a little bit of a shadow here and pull. This is a little V area, so you want to pull that color up into that V. Once I have this done all the way around, and I'm going to pretend I do here just for time's sake, I'm going to pretend I have this all shaded all the way around. I'm going to come back. Once that's all dry, I'm going to add the same shading with espresso on the outside edge of my candy cane and all the way around the outside edge of that ornament. Just picking up a little extra paint in my brush here, blending it out. I am going to continue doing my shading all the way around. You can see how that gives a lot of depth to your candy cane. And again, you're going to end up doing both sides of the candy cane. I don't want to do too much here because I don't want to lift all my paint up, but I think you get the idea. So once we're totally done with that, both the entire inside edge of my candy cane and then all the way around the outside edge are shaded with the espresso. We're going to deepen that shading with a little bit of Deco Art Asphaltum. And I did this all the way around the entire outside edge of, the inside edge of my candy cane. My highlight is more toward the outside edge, so I'm going to shade a little deeper on the inside. So again, side load, pick up that paint in the corner of the brush. I'm going to blend on my palette to get that paint blended through. And once again, I'm going to suggest you might want to dampen your surface. Make sure that first shading is totally dry before you add the extra water to it. And that's just going to help to pull the paint around once you get going here. So again, my highlight is along the outside edge. So I'm going to deepen the shading around the inside edge. Look how pretty that looks. You can really see how that helps to turn my candy cane as I go all the way around. I'm also going to add this here where the little hook part lays next to the flat part. And again, let's come around this way and finish coming all the way around this edge here. As I get into this turned area, I stop right about here because the highlight part on here is toward the outside edge of my ornament. So then I'm just going to add a little bit of that asphaltum shading on that inside edge of that hooked part of my candy cane. And then to give it a little bit of a highlight sparkle, I'm going to go back to my liner brush. And again, extra water in my paint and brush. I'm picking up a little bit of antique white in my brush, working that in. And I'm going to do a thin line all the way around my outside edge here, going through the highlight area. So wherever I have my highlight, I'm going to pull this line. Pick up a little bit more paint in my brush, and it's a little awkward angle for me, but I'm going to do the best I can here. Okay, need to get a little bit more water. What I like to do too is keep a little container here, a little cup with my water, and I can just work it right there on my palette. So again, I'm going to start bringing my line all the way around. And again, as I get into this little hooked area, my highlight is up here. So I need to add my highlight line right in here and just kind of have it fade out as you get into that. So you can see how each of these ornaments now, again, here are the two green ones. I have that line going through my highlight areas, and my espresso shading is my first shading, and then the asphaltum is the darkest right around the outside edge or inside edge. And then I don't think we need to maybe go through this. Maybe I'll show you real quickly. On the green stripes, then I added a Tuscan red line between my background and the inside edge of the candy cane. On the lime green one, I added a wild berry line around there. And on the red one, let's add a little bit of that. So again, water in my paint and brush. And I'm going to add an evergreen line between the background and the inside edge of my red candy cane. You're going to come all the way around with that. I'm not going to waste time doing that. I think you can probably figure out how to do that on your own. But again, if I started going this direction the first time, once it's dry, my second coat, I'm going to start here and come the other direction. Again, you just get so much better coverage when you do that. Okay, we're going to move on to our gumdrops. Where's my ornament with gumdrops? Here it is. I painted these, as you can see, in a purple, lavender, yellow, green, orange, and pinky red. You can do whatever you want, and you can put these colors however you want. This is just what I did. It doesn't make any difference. What I tried to do, though, as much as I could, was try to put contrasting colors next to each other. So the purple with the yellow, the orange with the green, and so on, so that it didn't, if I had my yellow and red and orange together, they would kind of blend together too much. So that's why I kind of did it this way. But feel free to do whatever you want, however you want to do these. Once again, I'm not going to walk you through every single gumdrop, because once we do one, I think you will be able to do all the others. I'll give you a little information and the colors that I use, but I don't think we need to do all the steps on it. So the colors that I used for these, for the purple gumdrop, I did a mix of Deco Royal Purple and Lilac Meadow, about equal parts. Just mix that together for my base coat. The yellow one is base coated in Spicy Mustard. The green one is base coated in Irish Moss. My orange one, I actually did an undercoat of bright orange plus antique white, about equal parts. And when that's dry, go on with the bright orange, because it's a really transparent color. You need a little bit of opaqueness there. And my pink one is done with wild berry. As I'm working you through the highlights on the pink one, it's the one I'm going to work on. I'll tell you what I did on the others. But what I like to do, again, since I don't want my colors to scream at me, I like to double load my brush. So since I base coated my pink gumdrop in wild berry, I'm going to pick up a little bit of that in a corner of my brush and blend it out. And then on the same corner of my brush, I'm picking up a little bit of blush pink, and I'm going to blend it out on the same area. That mixes those two colors together, and you don't end up with it screaming at you. This doesn't really have a light source. In a way it does. I could try to think of my light coming from the top of my design. So I'm going to add my highlight to the top of my gumdrop. And again, this is the base mix, or first mix, of the wild berry plus some blush pink in there. On my other colors, my highlight on my purple is done with Lilac Meadow. On the yellow one, it's done with Banana Cream. On the green, it's done with Margarita. And on my orange, I'm using Orange Twist. So that's the first highlight on all of those. My second highlight on my pink gumdrop, I'm using my dirty brush. I'm picking up more blush pink in the corner. I'm going to blend it out again. And I'm going to add that again to the top part of this gumdrop. You can see how that just kind of brightens it up a little bit. On these others, for my second highlight, I used Lilac on the purple one, Banana Cream, and a little bit of bleached sand mixed together in the brush, just like I did when I highlighted the pink one. On the green one, you're going to add some chartreuse yellow to it. On the orange, you're going to pick up your Orange Twist and Banana Cream. Again, blend those together, and that's going to be your last highlight on the orange. Now we need to come over here and add some shading to our gumdrop. And I'm doing that with Tuscan Red. So I've cleaned out my brush. I'm just going to pick up a corner of Tuscan Red on my brush. Again, I'm blending out on the same path. And this is going to go on the opposite side of my highlight. So my highlight is at the top of the gumdrop. I'm going to come down here and add my shading to the bottom edge of my gumdrop. And then when that's dry, which is what I have here, I'm going to add a second shading of Tuscan Red on here to darken that up just a little bit. Oh, I should say my shadows then on the purple, I used Royal Purple. On the yellow, I used True Ochre. On the green, Evergreen. And on the orange, I used Scarlet. For my second shadow then, I just added more Royal Purple to the purple one. On the yellow one, I actually did True Ochre and a little bit of Tuscan Red and a teeny bit of Royal Purple. And again, just blended those together in my brush for my last highlight on here. A little more Evergreen on the green one. On the orange one, you could either do Scarlet, or you could pick up a tad of Tuscan Red on that one. And again, on the pink one, we did 2 coats of the Tuscan Red for the shadow. And then we need to add some sugar dots on here. This is the fun part. And what I did, I have all the rest done except for the pink one. And again, you can just follow along with the written directions, but I picked up my final shading color. So in this case, it's my Tuscan Red on my liner brush. And I just tapped them in, starting on the shadow side of the brush, or the area, and have them spill out a little bit. Gives it a little interest. And a few you can bring over here into the highlight area, but not too many and not too big. Then I'm going to clean out my brush, and I'm going to go in with my last highlight color. So in this case, it was my blush pink. Load that in my brush. And I'm going to tap these in on the highlight side of my gumdrop. And some of these are spilling out onto the other gumdrops. And you're going to add a few into the shadow side, but not too many and not too big. And then only on the highlight side, and this is for every I don't know why I keep calling these berries. For every gumdrop, as I have my final highlight color in there, I'm going to pick up a little bit of bleached sand and work that into the brush. And I'm just going to tap some bleached sand. You see how much brighter those are. This is only going on the highlight side of each gumdrop. And so there you go. They're pretty quick and easy to do. I should say that when I base coated these, I did use a filbert brush. I like to use round brushes. Okay, we're going to work on the straight candy canes here on this ornament. As you see, I painted the red and the green in the back and the pink one on the top. It's up to you. You can change them around if you want. It's your piece. Do whatever you want. And again, walk you through the steps. I did base coat the two back ones in antique white. If you can see here, they're a little bit darker, and that's why I did those in antique white, because they're in the background. And the top one is done with bleached sand. Now, before I put the stripes on any of them, I took just some regular tape and laid it next to the ornaments that were underneath or even on top to make sure I didn't get my paint on there. So when I painted my red stripes, for example, I taped off this front one just to make sure I didn't get any paint on that front one. And you want to try to get it as close as you can to the outside edge. And make sure you fold over an area, otherwise it's almost impossible to try to get this tape off. Okay, so again, my red stripe is Tuscan red. My little green stripe is evergreen, and just the opposite on the green candy cane. Evergreen for the wide one, Tuscan for the narrow one. On the pink one, I'm using Wild Berry as my pink stripe, and I'm using my Jo Sonja number 6 Short Touch brush. It's a 1360 short liner. I really like the way this brush performs, and it's just the right width to get in here and work on these stripes. So again, I'm using the Wild Berry. I'm loading flat from the side of the puddle, turning my brush on both sides. I have all my bristles loaded. And again, I'm just pulling some S strokes on this candy cane. So start on one end, chisel edge, press through, lift up on the chisel edge. And again, I'm not using a pattern, I'm just pulling these strokes. You can use the pattern if you want, but I just gave it to you as your guide, and you're going to do that all the way down the candy cane. And just as before, once this first coat is dry, I start on the opposite end and pull the stroke going the opposite way, again to clean up these ends here, and you're going to get better coverage. And then the stripes in between are done with Irish Moss, again my liner brush, so extra water in my paint and brush. Probably need a teeny bit more water, just pick that up. And again, doesn't matter which side you pull these on, you're going to just stroke them in right next to one side of each of those pink stripes. And then you can take your tape off once you get your candy cane done. So let's add some stripes in here. I already have my pink ones on. And let's pretend those are on there for a while. Again, that's done with the Irish Moss. I'm going to come over here to my lighter greens, and you can either use Margarita or you can use Chartreuse Yellow. It's a tiny bit brighter. I really like that color, or a combination of both of them like I just did here. And you're going to add that to those green stripes. It's not going to show up too much on here because I only have one coat on. But you can see it a little bit better when we get over here. Here's a little bit easier for you to see that highlight on those light green stripes. You're doing the exact same thing on the red and the green as we did before. So on the red stripe, you're going to use Scarlet on your dry brush and dry brush that in closer to the top of the candy cane. On the green, you're going to start with Irish Moss or Margarita. See which one shows up better for you. And on your stripes here, again, you're going to do the Scarlet. And here's a little bit of Margarita. Let's get a little bit of highlight on those pink stripes now. Oops. So again, I'm using my Dynasty number 4 dry brush, and I'm using it dry. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that Wild Berry, which was my base color in the brush, and then the blush pink, and take the excess out. And again, this is just dry brushing toward the top of each of those pink stripes. Then I'm going to pick up a little more Wild Berry in my brush and add a second highlight on there to brighten it up. And this is where on my Irish Moss stripes I might pick up some of that chartreuse yellow. And again, on your red stripes you're going to add the, with scarlet in your brush, add some orange twist. On your green stripes you're going to add more margarita or some chartreuse yellow, just as you did the highlights on all the other ones. I don't think I need to show you how to do that because we already worked through all of that. We're going to add shading to all of these candy canes. Again, I'm picking up espresso in my brush in the corner. We're going to side load and blend. And I'm going to add the espresso to both sides of all of these candy canes, so the top and the bottom. I need a little more water in my brush, so I'm just picking that up and adding a little bit more paint in there. So again, here's this side of the green, and I'm coming across the top edge of my pink one. And then I like to make sure that's 100% dry. And then I'll just show you right now, you're going to come and do the opposite side of each of those candy canes. And then wherever a candy cane lays under another one, make sure you add that shadow in there as well. Okay. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit of that asphaltum again in my brush in the corner, blend it out real well. And just as we did on the big candy canes that went all the way around, I'm going to add this color just to the bottom edge of each of these candy canes. See how that really deepens that shadow. And I'm coming over here on the top one, on the bottom side. And again, I'm adding this wherever a candy cane lays underneath another one. And that just deepens that shadow up. So that's all there is to those candy canes. They're pretty darn simple. Now my favorite candies that I did are these hard Christmas candies. I just think they're so fun and pretty and festive. I just love them, and I love eating them too. So there's a side note on that one. Okay, so again, I base coated the two back ones with antique white. The top one I base coated with bleached sand. The first thing I did on these was, I'm using my flat brush again. I'm picking up a little bit of bleached sand in the corner and blending it out. On the candy, the candy that's over here on the left, I'm adding a highlight right along that whole outside edge. And then on the candy with the Christmas tree, since it has a little red stripe that goes around it, and I just eyed this in, but you can certainly put your pattern on if you want. I came in just a little bit from the outside edge, left a little bit. Now, let me pick up a little more paint so you can see it a little bit better. There we go. And just pulled this not quite on the outside edge, leaving a little bit of room there for that red stripe. So I've got a little bit of highlight on the center part of that candy. And while that's drying, we're going to start adding our red areas on the center candy cane. Again, on your pattern, where it's red, I added some cross hatching on the pattern so you know exactly where to put that. And the way I like to do these is I'm using my liner brush, again with Tuscan Red, a little extra water in that paint and brush. And I'm going to outline these areas. And once I have it outlined, even up there, then I color it in. And pick up a little more paint on that brush and color it in. That way it just gives me cleaner lines rather than trying to use a flat brush or a round brush to try to get it in. After I get my first base coat done this way, then I do come back in with maybe a round brush to do my second base coat. But at least this way with my first base coat, it helps me to get some nice clean lines. And let me show you that one more time, because I want you to see that all you need to do is, again, think S. So I'm starting here. Oh, let me back up a little bit. You might notice that I have blue lines here from my pattern. I didn't use any graphite. I like to use Choco paper. It comes in blue and white. And the nice thing about it is it dissolves in water. So I never have to deal with a graphite line underneath my painting ever again. The bad news is it disappears in water. So if I take a little bit of water, take it on my finger here, and rub it on, you can see my pattern line disappeared. However, I would much rather deal with putting my pattern on twice or 3 times or however many times I need to do it, rather than have to deal with, like here, I did use a graphite here. Even when you've painted over it, you can never ever get that graphite line out. With Choco paper, even if you've painted over it and you still see the line, just tip it with water and it's going to disappear. This one won't because it's graphite. Okay, so back to what I wanted to show you. I'm loading my brush again in my Tuscan Red. And again, just think S. So I'm starting up here and making an S. Starting here. Again, making an S, or backward S in that case. And then I'm filling in the center. We're not going to worry about doing that right now. Same thing when I do my green tree, which I already put in here. This is done with evergreen. I outlined it first, and then I stroke that color in. And I do want 2 coats on both the Christmas tree and all of these red stripes here. So let's get to decorating these. On this one here, off to the left, I added a wild berry line on the outside, and that's next to where my highlight is. And then I just came in just a tiny little bit and added another wild berry line in there. In between those lines, I'm picking up a little bit of Irish moss in my brush. And I'm just going to add an Irish moss line in between these 2 pink lines. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Candy's not perfect. And I'm going to add some in here. On my center candy, using my liner again, and a little bit of evergreen. And in between these, are kind of next to one side, I'm going to pull an evergreen line. Once again, I did 2 coats on these, and whichever direction I pulled my first coat, I went the opposite direction for my second coat. And then on my red area here, again, I use my liner brush with the Tuscan Red. And you're just going to press down a little bit harder to get that wider stripe on there. Okay, then I added some highlights. So while I have this color in my brush, let's work on this red stripe that goes around that Christmas tree candy. I'm picking up a little bit of wild berry in my brush, and I'm going to add that right here to the top edge here and right down here. This is already Wild Berry, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of my blush pink in my dirty brush. I'm going to add a little bit of highlight right here on the outside edge of my pink stripe here, and also right in here. On this one, I already put my first layer of my berry, wild berry highlight, so I'm going to add a little bit of that blush pink on here. And this already has blush pink on it, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of bleach sand in my brush, mix that together on my palette, and add a little brighter highlight here on the outside edge. Cleaning my brush out, we need to add some highlights to our green stripes. So on here, again, I'm using my liner brush and Margarita. And again, it's going to go basically the same place where I put it on my pink stripe, kind of in the center. And then I'm coming over here to my chartreuse yellow. And I'm going to add that on top of that Margarita stripe, but not quite so wide. And while we're working with greens, let's come over here to our green stripes here, and going to take your evergreen, and you can either use Irish moss, whatever, I kind of do whatever mood strikes me. You can even pick up a little bit of Margarita in with that, and that's going to go not quite on the outside edge, coming in a little bit from the outside edge. And again, you can pick up a little bit of that chartreuse yellow in your brush and add a little bit of a brighter highlight on there as well. Since this candy is sitting on top, it needs to have a little bit more sparkle to it. I'm going to go back to my number 4 dry brush, and I'm going to add some highlights now to the red areas on my center candy. So again, it's dry. I'm picking up Scarlet. I love this color. Not sure why they call it Scarlet, because it looks so orange to me, but it's just a perfect highlight color for a bright red. I'm coming in a little bit, oops, a little too much paint on there. Let me take that off. Here we go. On the top areas here, I'm a little closer to the top of the stripe. Not quite on the edge, but a little closer to the edge. When I'm down here at the bottom, moving it in just a hair, so it's a little closer to the center. And with my dirty brush, with the scarlet still in there, I'm picking up a little bit of orange twist, working that in the brush, and adding another highlight on top. And we need to come over here to our Christmas tree. Picking up a corner of Irish moss in my brush and blending it out. And I'm just going to add this to the outside edge, and mostly like on the tips of this Christmas tree. It doesn't show up tons, but it's just a nice little highlight. Then I'm going to pick up, within my dirty brush, a corner of Margarita. Again, blend it out, and I'm blending it right on top of my Irish moss. Kind of helps blend those colors together. I'm just going to go right on top of what I just did. So just brighten up that highlight on that outside edge of my Christmas tree. Let's do this one here too. I think I forgot to do that one. There, you can see how pretty it looks. Okay, now we need to add some shading on here. Going to go back to the same colors that we used on all our candy canes. So first is going to be Espresso. Again, side load, blend it out. I'm going to shade on both back candies right next to the one that's in the front. So just right there. When I'm down here at the bottom, I'm going to make it a tiny bit wider. Same thing with this candy here. Just come in right next to that center candy. And again, making it a little bit wider. On this center candy, I wanted to give it a little bit more dimension. So across the top edge here, I came in kind of under my highlight. Just like from, let's say, 2:30 or 3 o'clock over to about 9 o'clock. And then the bottom side of the candy is going to get shaded all the way across the whole bottom edge. And you're going to take that from about, let's say, 8:30 to about 3:30 across that back edge. And then for my final shading on here, I'm picking up Asphaltum, again, in the dirty brush. Blend, blend, blend. I'm going to do mostly on the bottom sides of these candies. So I'm going to add it down in here, down here on this back one, and only on the bottom of my center candy. Again, this just gives it a little bit more dimension. I think really like this Asphaltum. It's a very warm color. I think it just warms everything right up. So that's about it for all the painting. I want to show you just a couple quick little things. I wanted to use 3 different colors for the candy canes going around the outside edge. And so since there was so much red in these candies, I chose to do the green stripe, but I also played with red, and I kind of like that too. So again, just to give you some ideas that you can change these colors up. You can make all your candy canes red, you can make them all green, you can make them all the lime green and pink, whatever works for you. After I had it done to this point, I looked at these and I just thought my background was just screaming at me too much, so I added some color on that background. I'm just going to show you what I did on the back of this one. Here you can see my stenciling really well too. But again, I'm dampening, since I have a long way to go, I'm dampening the surface first with some water. And I didn't want this color that I have coming around here to be too dark. I just wanted to give it a subtle little color. So I have green going around the inside edge here. I'm going to add red to go around the back edge. So I'm using my Tuscan red, again picking up just a corner of the brush. Blend, blend, blend. And that water that I just put down is going to help to pull it around too. I'm not using much pressure. You see how light that is? I just, again, wanted to give it just a hint of color. I'm coming all the way around. You can see I keep kind of lifting and stroking and lifting and stroking as I pull this all the way around the outside edge or that inside edge. If you're going inside next to the candy cane, again keeping it nice and light. Once I get my color all the way on, I like to take my brush and just try as much as I can to come all the way around. Doesn't always work in as much of a continuous circle as I can. And again, even if you lift and you kind of come back and forth a little bit, it's going to help to smooth it out. Okay, so that's kind of how I got that subtle color in that background. And then, I kind of looked at it and thought my red was a little garish. So I wet it down again and I added just a tiny hint of evergreen over that. That kind of browns it up, red and green make brown. So it kind of browns it up a little bit, but you can still see some of that green showing through too. And I really kind of like the way that looked. And then when everything is dry, and this to me is the really fun part, I love to use the Deco Art Glamour Dust Glitter Paints. I have a bunch of them over here. I'm just going to bring a few over for you to see. So I have neon orange that I used on my orange gumdrop. I have silver bling that I use on the white areas. I have limelight that I use on green. This is lemon drop from my yellow gumdrop. This is gold glitz, which I used around the on the candy cane that go all the way around. I use sizzling red on the red areas, and I used Celebration Pink on the pink areas. Let me just put some of this out on my palette. I want you to, or on my surface here even, I want you to see that each of these glitter paints are colored. And the nice thing about these paints is when I taught the kids, I was telling the teachers, they went nuts. What do you mean you put glitter on? But this glitter doesn't go anywhere because it sits right there in your paint. Look how pretty those are. And then when you brush them on, you have red, which is going to spark up your red areas. Here's my gold glitz. Maybe that's not showing up too well there. Let's add that over here too. Well, let me show you this. Here's my gold glitz. I love the gold glitz because I think it gives it a real old antique kind of Victorian feel on the candy cane. Here's my pink. You can see it's just a subtle pink. Let's give you a color that you can see better maybe. Here's the neon orange. This is really pretty. Again, this is the color that I used on my gumdrop. And let me show you the green too. It also, I think it's Purple Princess, I believe, is the purple I used. They're all in the written directions. Here's the orange. Look how pretty that is. I just love that. And again, each of these has the color in it too, so it intensifies the color you're putting it on. And here's the green. It's just so, so pretty. There are a ton of other colors too, which I love to play around with. And then the edges of my ornaments, I did some in red and I did some in green. And I just took, actually I took, which I didn't bring here with me, let's pretend this is just a small sponge brush. And the colors I used are the Deco Arts Metallics. I used Festive Green and Festive Red. What better colors to use for a Christmas ornament? So let's pretend, I'll put a little bit of this out, that this brush I have in my hand is a sponge brush, even though it's not. I load it like just the tip of the brush, into the edge of the brush. And then it's easy to just run around the edge of my ornament. And again, it's Festive Red and Festive Green that I used. Got these little circles at my local craft store. I just drilled a hole in there for the hanger, and again I found this metallic kind of cording at my craft store, so I chose to use gold and a red and a green. And once you have your ornaments done, before you even put your hangers on, you do want to varnish them. I do like to use the Deco Art Decor varnishes. They work really beautifully. I never have a problem with a brush mark or a bubble or anything. They just work on very nicely. And the nice thing too about these glitter paints is sometimes other products I've used, if I put them on first and then varnish, my glitter disappears. With these Glamour Dust glitter paints, you can put your glitter on first and then put your varnish on, and they look just as beautiful as you did when you first put it on. So that's it. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to contact me. My email address is bbunsey@calicogoose.com. You can see some of my other designs at www.calicogoose.com. And until next time, this is Barbara Bunzy saying Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I apologize, I forgot to tell you this. I added a little highlight line on these. This is kind of helps make the candy cane turn. So on the two candy canes that are in the back that are base coated with the antique white, I pulled just a thin liner of antique white through those highlight areas. On the candy cane that's in the front, it's based in bleached sand, there's a thin liner of bleached sand through that highlight. The same thing happens on this piece here. We added a little bit of highlight on these and in our stripes, etc. on the center candy to give it again some dimension, make it look a little round and a little thicker. Since this one is based again in bleached sand, I pulled a thin line of bleached sand through the highlight areas. And that just shows you where the light is as opposed to the darkness and the shadow. That's it. Thanks again for watching.